This video is dedicated to my sister Suli, who asked me how I make my bread step by step. So previously, I have already shown you how to mill your own flour, grind your own flour at home from the whole wheat. Now, today, I'm going to show you how to make the starter from the grinded wheat flour. So, what you need is one, for easy, I use a container. You don't need it to be so big, but this is the one that I don't use it for anything because it's so big. So now I dedicate it for making starter. Now, the other thing you need is half a cup of the measurement. This one is 1/4 of the measurement. So this is half cup, this is 1/4 cup. Now, take out the flour that you have already milled and use the half cup of the flour. Scoop out half cup of your whole wheat flour. So I have half cup of flour here. I just put it by the side at the container. And then with this 1/4 cup, you would need to get some filter water. And you just pour some filter water in. Don't make it full because I want the water to be slightly warm. And you just add some hot water in it. So the ratio of the water is half of the flour. So now you just pour some flour onto the container and some water. And you begin to knead it. The reason I use half cup of the flour is because I only make the bread once a week. Unless my husband happened to eat more that week. But usually I only bake once a week. And I don't want to have a lot of the starter discard. And also I don't want to have a lot of starter because the more starter you put into your bread, the more sour it's going to be. So this is what I would do. Just half cup, and you just use your hand to mix the water and the flour together. Previously, my sister Suli has sent me some information about making the starter using making the yeast using fruits. And I saw the one that you can use any kind of fruits. You can use raisin, or you can use the actual grapes, or you can use apple even. So because I saw the process is quite similar to my apple cider, so I did try to bake, use the apple cider to ferment. And I can't remember what happened, but because the apple cider is so precious to me, so I don't want to use that. In fact, I think the flour one, the starter using the flour, sort of ferments better. It makes the dough rise a little bit better. But because for whole wheat flour, it is always more dense. If you like your bread to rise a lot, usually it's not advisable to use whole wheat flour, and especially those that you grind from the wheat itself. And they will advise you to add other normal flour or bread flour or all-purpose flour. But because I do not know what are the ingredients in the flour, I have no idea how they make the flour, what they mix inside. So I believe in natural, having the natural food created by God. So as much as I can. So I just leave it as using the whole wheat flour. So with it done, you just close the container and leave it outside at room temperature for 24 hours and visit it 24 hours later. Hello, it is now about 24 hours later. As you can see, the starter itself did not ferment, it did not grow in size very much. I can't tell the difference. And when I smell it, I can still smell the flour smell. So right now, what you need to do is to feed the starter. Before you do that, first you separate it into half, because half of it will go into the starter discard, which I usually use for making the pancake. A little bit of the hot water into the filter water. The weather nowadays is very hot. So first you wet it and just add onto it and mix it. So again, let it ferment for another 12 hours before you feed it. I think I would have to leave it more than 12 hours. Hopefully that tomorrow morning I don't get too busy, that I can feed it as soon as possible. Definitely don't let it go for 24 hours. This is the active starter I have. That's all I have got now. Nowadays, I'm using this little cups, 25 ml, to feed my starter, so that my starter does not grow a lot. And when I use it, I would use almost half or almost all of it for the bread and left a little bit. And so now I am going to feed my starter and to put it into the fridge. 1 cup. I'm going to feed 2 cups. 2 cups. One cup of the filter water. Slightly less than 2 cups. Just use a plastic spoon and mix them together. I'm going to close it. You see, it's about here. And I have got room for it to grow to almost double. I'm going to leave it outside at the tropical weather for 1 or 2 hours, probably 2 hours before I leave it, put it into the fridge. This is a little experiment I did. These two are using whole wheat and grind at home and mill it into flour, and I use it to bake this bread. The recipe for these three are exactly the same. Basically, use lots of butter, use milk, use eggs, and the flour. This one is using the bread flour. So you can see that the texture is completely different. It's a bit like the normal. If you buy from the supermarket, you see the texture of the bread is similar. Now, all three is without using yeast. What we do is to use the homemade starter. We make the starter ourselves. Now this one is using the starter which is not so active. This is using the starter which is very active, similar to that one. So all three are using the same recipe. Now this is the starter which when I first started making, I use it for half a cup with the water, with quarter cup of the water. The first time, leave it for 24 hours. After 24 hours, the first feeding is at 12 hours. And then I fed it again, another 12 hours. Then, after that, I use it for baking. But when I mix the texture for the bread, mix the entire thing, I leave it for another 8 hour for fermentation before I bake it using the machine, the bread machine. This one is using a very active starter. So you can see that even though both recipe is the same, you can see the size of the bread is different. That this one rise much more than the other one. But the texture is basically quite similar. It's the same. But the thing about this is a bit more sour than that one. This is using a very active starter, but it's using bread flour. And the recipe is the same, but as you can see, the texture is completely different. I have no idea what they use for making the bread flour. And the texture of the bread is like those that you can buy. But obviously this is better. This is baked by my niece, and she used the sourdough recipe. But again, all these are using lots of butter and eggs and milk and flour. But the only difference is these two are using the whole wheat which I grind into flour and using the bread machine. That is the same recipe, but it's not using the bread machine. After kneading, directly go into the oven.